So, folks, our next speaker wants to remind you that Scala was built and released in 2004. We've got an anniversary, actually, this year. And over the years, there have been critical changes made to it. And he does want to remind you that it is a live organism. And probably we need to make some updates and not take all the features for granted, because in a couple of years, probably they won't be working. So what he wants to encourage you to do is to apply these changes every few weeks, as he told me, not every few months or not every few years or not never. That was the thing. So our next speaker, Alexis, has been also contributing to the Scala open source ecosystem for many years now, so some of you might already know him. He runs the Scala consultancy company Wiringbits, and he helps with onboarding talented juniors to the Scala ecosystem. I did ask him about his favorite games. He said it's Zelda games or Mario games, because it makes him connect with his children. So you see, a connection is still here also as a topic. So now please give it up for Alexis Hernandez, Principal Scala Consultant at Wiringbits. Here you are.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Alex, and hi everyone. Like you have already heard, I'm going to talk about something quite unusual in the conferences that we have in Scala, which is bringing you into Scala 277, but right now, in 2024. Is there any in the audience that happens to have used the Scala 277 before? Oh my God, there are more people than I expected. So the truth is that, I had been working with Scala for 10 years or something around those lines, and even myself, I have never actually got to deal with the Scala 277 until last year, which was a big surprise for me, because things back then, 15 years ago, were very different to what they are now, and this is part of what I am going to share in this presentation. To remind you, Scala 277 is from 15 years ago. It was released in 2009. And everything started because I tend to do quite a lot of contract work with companies or individuals, and I got a very particular customer request. He wanted to compile a very old Scala project that he told me that happened to actually use SVT. The goal was preparing a fat jar and make it run with Java 8. And the Java 8 detail is important because Scala 277 existed when Java 8 was not there. It was running with Java 6, as far as I remember. And the project that I am talking about is called Kestrel, one of those projects in the graveyard from Twitter that apparently there are still some companies depending on those, even though they had not been maintained for a while. So prepare yourself to get into many problems. For any of you that are likely very involved with the Scala, whenever you get onboarded into a Scala project, what's the first thing that you actually take a look into? The build SVT, right? Or well, the mil build file or whatever, it's the shiny new build tool that we have in the Scala ecosystem. But if you see something that says that uses SVT, you typically are going to look into SVT. But what is it? There is none. Why? Well, apparently with the Scala 277 and the old SVT version, in this particular case it was 073, an old project like I told you, the builded properties file used to have quite a lot of other details, including the Scala version and a few other things from the project. So there was also a different Scala file specifying the project dependencies in this particular path, a project slash build slash Kestrel project in this particular case, where we see all the few dependencies that we have there. All of this was new to me, even though I had been in Scala for a long time. And based on all this initial information, we got some understanding on what's going on, at least. But there is an implicit detail that I didn't that was not obvious from the build file, which is the requirement for getting Java 6 in order to get the project to compile initially. Java 6, it's particularly complicated to get right now. It is not available in SDK man. It was available last year. I have no idea why it's gone, but it's gone. If you try it right now, you cannot find it in a SDK man. Oracle, in theory, it has JDK 6 until you actually click on the download button, register yourself in order to get the link plus the advertisement from Oracle, and just get the 404. The file, it's not there. I mean, it's advertised to be there, but it's not there. So we start with the first challenge. But let's forget about the JDK team because this is Scala, not Java. So what's going to happen once we try launching the current SVT version, the one from 2024, from 2023, and who cares, even from 2020? What's going to happen? Who from you on the audience, can you please raise your hand, whoever thinks that SVT is going to refuse loading because SVT 073 is just way too old. It's not going to work. Who of you think that that's going to happen? Just raise your hand, please. Well, more people than I expected. The second option, I am assuming that the people that didn't raise a hand is what you are thinking, or you are maybe thinking it's something more sophisticated. But the real thing is that none of those are the correct answer. The answer is SVT 073 doesn't exist anymore in any repository. Where are we going to get it? First problem. So SVT did try it to pull 073, but it's not there. It's not in Maven Central or any other in another repository where we can actually time finding it. So I start Googling, I go to the SVT website, to the old GitHub, because SVT used to belong to a different GitHub project and blah, blah, blah. And I am able to find a web page that has all the SVT launchers from 0.1 until 0.79. That's the last one that was there. So my idea is if I get this SVT version, maybe I am going to be able to compile the project. But guess what? Same thing's happening. I mean, for the people that are a little bit more familiar with SVT, it's composed by two binaries. One is the launcher, which is basically the one picking up the build definition and saying, I need this particular SVT version, and it's the actual tool. So the launcher is there. We found it here, but when trying to fetch the actual tool, turns out that it still does not exist, so it's not very different. And this also reminds me, for the people that are relatively new to Scala, we used to call this the simple build tool before. Later on, for all the controversy it caused, it was renamed to the Scala build tool, but before it was a simple build tool. But the simple build tool cannot resolve itself. So we have a little bit more details on the logs on what's going on. It has tried a few repositories that are not alive anymore. So from this, we get a few things. There was an artifactory, maybe a repository, whatever you want to call it databinder.net, where SVT used it to pull the artifacts from, but that's dead. And it's gone with all the artifacts that it has. There was another one called the scalatools.org that I was not aware of, but it's also dead. My bet is that the SVT binaries were likely at the Scala tools repository, but when it's gone and all the artifacts are gone with it. But for the ones that have a bit of experience on this kind of migrations, you might notice something different as well. It tries to resolve artifacts from Maven Central, but it's using HTTP instead of the HTTPS protocol that is the thing that we use all of the days right now. But when you call Maven Central with HTTP protocol, it refuses to get you anything useful. So maybe we can recompile SVT in order to change HTTP for HTTPS, or use it in the jar directly or something like that, I don't know. And maybe we are going to have some luck. But Maven Central doesn't have this binary, so I better forget about trying to find this version because it's not doable. But wait, the source code is there. I'm unable to find it here in this old repository from the Scala Center, this specific commit, and it has SVT073. So I get back to the idea. If I can compile this, maybe I'm going to be able to compile the other Kestrel project and get away with this and make some money with the freelancing gig that I'm working on. But analyzing the project, we see that we need to compile SVT072. Do you remember this? I mean, I am getting paid to compile an application with SVT073, but turns out that I need to compile something with 072, using Scala 277 as well. Where are we going to go if we get down to this approach? So, in the summary on this presentation, I'm telling that I better forget about compiling 073 because it's impossible. But the truth is that when I was working on this, I actually tried it. And then I got a few more dependencies that I couldn't resolve. I started compiling JNA and other Java libraries. But anyway, just imagine that we are forgetting about this. I'm not going to get diving more into this. I was also talking to a friend who actually got this compiling. So it's doable. What can we do now? What do you think? I saw two choices at the time. We could possibly just upgrade SVT to a same version. I mean, even if it's an old one, but something that can be resolvable from even Central or somewhere else it is still alive. Or if I want to go to the safe path, but the long path, maybe I can just create my own tool just to compile Kestrel. If I can download the Scala 277 and I can find the dependencies, I see no reason why I cannot actually build a custom script that fills the class path, does a little mangling with the Scala files, and just compiles everything. That might be like the safest option from my point of view. But I'm going to try upgrading SVT. I am going to find the oldest version that SDK man still has available, because then I have the guarantee that I am going to be able to resolve the artifacts. So I'm going to drop everything away from the build properties and just add the old SVT version here, 0.13. Please raise your hand who had touched 0.13 before, because that, when I started in Scala, that was the version. So only a few people. Okay, I guess there are not so many dinosaurs from the Scala ecosystem here, but that's good because you didn't miss it much. The ecosystem was bad back then. So now SVT actually launches. So we have something working, but we forgot about a few important details. We didn't add anything to the project itself, so it's obvious that it should launch. But when we're trying to compile, it will, of course, start complaining about the lack of dependencies from Twitter. And there is also another point. SVT 0.13, by default, it's going to deal with the Scala 2.10. That was the Scala version that I first touched when I got into the Scala ecosystem. So I don't care about JLine. That's a minor issue related to unrelated to everything else I had been facing until now. But the problem with this is that I think I messed up with the slides, but somewhere here, I added the Scala 277 to the builder SVT. So the project finally is born. It has a builder SVT now with 277, but guess what? 277 is not available anymore. Just like SVT and just like everything else we have been talking about in this presentation. So what can we do now? Well, it turns out that the Scala 277 can be downloaded manually from the Scala Center website, and the Builder SVT allows you specifying a local version from the Scala compiler. So if you want to experiment with the Scala compiler, you can just put it into SVT itself, and that's what I did. So what do you think is going to happen next? It's going to work? Welcome to the SVT world. Another error, and I have no idea what is it all about. Well, apparently, SVT 0.13 was just too new in order to work with the Scala 2.7. So that's a problem. after trying to deal with the source code, dealing with the error and finding on the internet, turns out that I found that this issue is not compatible, and that's why we get a totally unrelated error to what we had been writing. Nothing related to the builder.svt, nothing related to the project properties or anything else in the project itself. They just cannot play together. So what can we do now? One idea is, well, we could just downgrade SVT until we get a version that can play with the Scala 277. That might work, but given what we saw before, it's likely going to get us again with the problems that the things cannot be resolved. So, analyzing the other option, creating the custom script for compiling this project doesn't seem too crazy by this time. What do you think? Maybe it's the right time to start working on that. But no, I mean, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to try something different. Let's try upgrading the Scala to the oldest version that also works with 0.13. And I'm pretty lucky because I was just a few versions away. Like I was this close to get it working, so I just have to bump the version from 2.77 to 2.82. Remove the local Scala because that's not useful anymore, and SVT finally launches. There we go. So I'm going to try compiling after adding all the dependencies from the previous build definition that we saw. And guess what? Welcome to the world where you cannot resolve a single dependency. Well, being more honest about this, it's not a single dependency. There were a few more. The log4j, the simple log4j is still available. So 2 dependencies less to worry about, but all the things from the Twitter ecosystem are gone. There is a particular detail that occurred with the Scala ecosystem back then. These dependencies on Scala were compiled for 2.77. But those are not compatible with 2.8, which is why you see the suffix here, specs underscore 2.82. If they were not compiled for 2 and 8, they are not going to work. In Scala 3, that's not the case. It works way better, so you are in a good time to use Scala. So, revisiting the options again, what can we do? The second choice starts to be more appealing the more errors that I get. But I'm going to reject that and I'm going to try the first one. There are only like 5 or 6 libraries that I don't have. I can try compiling those myself, and maybe I'm going to be away with this. So I'm going to comment out those dependencies. I'm going to try finding them, and turns out that the source code is available for most of them. For the ones that are not in GitHub, they are the Maven Central. You know, when you publish something to Maven Central, you publish the jar for the compiled library, you publish the docs, and typically you also publish the source code. So for one of those, I was able to get the source code right there. On the other hand, there are a few stuff from Twitter that does not exist anymore, and the sources are not completely clear on what version I am dealing with. But more or less, that's the case. And here, yet another gem, repo.aka.io, another Artifactory repository with all the artifacts, it's gone. And one particular library was there. So, let's drop everything that doesn't seem critical. X-ray specs and related to the test, I am not going to care about the test. I already have a huge deal with everything else, so I'm not going to worry about the test just right now. I'm not going to worry about documentation either, so let's just focus on the Twitter stuff. There are 3 libraries. What's going to happen once I copy the library from Twitter into my project? Maybe I'm going to get the same thing than before, maybe no, I'm not sure. But then I found out that I was pretty lucky because Twitter Actors, which is like the critical dependency for this project, does not have any external dependencies. I felt like that was my lucky hour working on this. Finally, something good. So I just grabbed the source code, placed it right here into the file system. I try compiling, I got errors, which is totally expected. Then I go to the next library turns out that it has a few dependencies, but if you pay attention, those are the same dependencies that the Crestel project is already depending on. So another lucky thing from the day. Even though I am not going to need recompiling a huge amount of transitive dependencies. I get more errors, I don't care about those right now. Let's find the tier library that's critical, copy the source code. It has no obvious external dependencies, which is good. I had more errors. Then I found out that there is also this library that I ignored before actually matters. It's supposed to be for test only, but in this project they use it for the production code. Apparently they use it a version of the time that can be mocked into the test, something like when you use the clock from Java. But given that a single file is important for this project, so let's only pick this file and move on. I want to get something compiling soon. So we have 100 and a little bit more errors to resolve in order to fix the problem. And one very important detail that was helpful for me when working with this, IntelliJ works with 282. So with SVT 013 and 282, IntelliJ was able to detect the problems, show me the source code, show me the documentation, how to complete the stuff, and that proved to be pretty helpful because originally I was just typing stuff in VS Code, going into the compiler, opening 282 documentation to see whether I was missing something with the type signatures, and that was a pain. So introducing IntelliJ also helped quite a lot into this. So thank you for IntelliJ plugin. So let's fix the first problems. If you remember, I had copied everything from the Twitter actors library, but for some reason, the Twitter package is complaining that the actor is not found. But the library didn't have any external dependencies, so what's going on here? It does not make any sense. I copied everything. It turns out that this simple thing that I added here was able to fix most of the compile problems that I had. Apparently, Scala 2.7 behaved very differently with relation to the imports and the scopes than 2.8 and what we have right now in version 3. For example, previously, when you have this file, termination monitor, it was importing everything from the scheduler package, like right now, but it was also importing everything from actors, everything from Twitter, and everything from the comp package. So everything was imported transitively. So by using this trick, I am going to import everything from actors and everything from the scheduler, apply this change to something around 15, 20 files, and 90% of the errors are gone. So that's good. There were a few other changes on the collection library. For example, this was a way for converting a mutable collection into an immutable one by calling the read only. I do not understand why they removed this because it was idiomatic from my point of view. But we can just replace it with a different way. Just construct the immutable map based on the mutable map that we already have, and that's it. More errors are gone. The collection library also changed because previously it was using the iterator, and now they are using the iterable. Don't ask me what's the difference about those two things because I don't remember by now. But changing the type definitions like this was enough to fix a few more problems until you get into something more interesting. Turns out that the iterable interface doesn't support a few things that the iterator has, and Kestrel is depending on those. And the way to fix those, it will have been a little bit more tricky. I mean, I analyzed this for a while, trying to decide what to do. The first one is simple. Just replace contains by the exist because IntelliJ tells me that there is exist method, and that's helpful. But the other thing, the iterator.next, it's not obvious on how to do it. But turns out that the Twitter actors library had a newest version that was cross-compiling to 2.7 and also compiling to 2.8. So I just went there, grabbed the source code, put it right here, and solved the problem. Another problem related to collections, because back then we also were a fan of the implicit conversions that were discouraged a while ago. But given that, I had to rewrite a little bit of the code for dealing with the collections. I mean, it does exactly the same, but it's a way to make the compiler happy. Voila, it's working. I got a version compiling, and I felt super excited by that time. I mean, if I am honest with you, there were a few times when I was actually thinking on giving up because I was having headaches or getting stressed because of the lack of dependencies and a few other things. So in order to finalize what I was asked to do, let's add the SVT assembly plugin. And if everything was well, I'm not going to require resolving any conflicts with a custom merge strategy, etc. And this is also an old version, by the way, 0.15. I'm not sure in which one we are not, but it's way, way ahead. And turns out the assembly works at the first try. So that's good. Let's try running the project to see whether it's working and doing what it's supposed to do. So I have executed the project. Apparently it's running. This is Java 8, by the way, by the time I have switched to Java 8, which was supported. Tailing the logs, it works. Connecting to Telnet, issuing a few commands, making sure that it works. And that's it. I mean, the initial journey was pretty complicated, but later on, once we got SVT and Scala playing and IntelliJ, it became simpler. Not very different from a migration from 2.13 to a Scala 3 or from 2.11 to 2.13 or something like that. I have done quite a lot of those, but it's the first one that I do from old technology. So like Alex mentioned it, I want to ask you, please, for God's sake, update your dependencies. We have a Scala Steward. Leverage that. Because if you don't do that, some poor developer like me is going to be getting down the rabbit hole just to try recovering a very old project. We have also saw that the Scala compatibility between minor versions used to suck. That's not the case anymore. So you are in a good epoch to be working with the Scala 3 right now. It's very nice that the Scala Center is keeping all the old versions from the compiler for download, because I didn't want it to compile that. I mean, it would have been going that rabbit hole again, and that's it. There is another important thing, like we developers tend to take a lot of stuff for granted. We expect that the source code is going to be there. The GitHub project is going to be there. Maven Central is going to be there. But we just saw three places where artifacts were hosted and they are gone. And I didn't mention the bean tray because bean tray happened recently and it was a pain to migrate away from bean tray as well. And if you had to do what I did, compiling an old, like really, really old Scala application, sit and think about for a minute and consider carefully the choices. Because if you go to the wrong path, you are going to waste quite a lot of time. And that's it for today. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexis. Do we have some time for questions? Anybody? Any questions, or you need to digest this all a bit?
Have fun.
I think they need to digest it. So anyway, you can reach out to Alexis. He's here with us, and online also they can contact you. You got the details. Yeah. So thank you very much. Once again, big round of applause, and I hope you feel motivated.